good to chat with you again. Welcome back to As It Goes. I'm Lydia, the founder of Reself. We're all figuring it out as it goes, and conversations help us along the way. Here is one of those conversations with Anna Peterson Macsalka, the founder of Zenimal, a screen-free meditation device that I actually discovered through one of our Reself family members who emailed me about Zenimal when she was looking for meditations for her grandkids, which is such a beautiful connection. I could tell you what Anna and I talk about in this conversation, which you can skim through in the show notes, or I could tell you how I felt after I finished talking to Anna. This was at a point in my journey with Reself that I was feeling a little hopeless and lost and confused. After speaking to Anna, I felt so energized, so motivated from within myself. Anna is an incredibly beautiful mirror for each one of us on our journeys of living authentically and wanting to be a good human and wanting the world to be a good place and believing in humanity and having hope. I mean, this conversation was everything I needed at that moment. And then to re-watch as I edited this was so rewarding. I'm so excited for you to have this experience. Thank you for landing here today with Anna and I, and for giving yourself this nourishment. Let's take a deep breath in together and a deep breath out to ground us in this moment that we're going to share. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself and share your journey with us to creating Zenimals?
Yeah, so I am Anna Peterson Macsalka, and I'm the founder of Zenimal, the proud and grateful founder of Zenimal. It's been an amazing journey getting up to this point, and I guess what Zenimal is we make screen-free guided meditation devices for children, teens, and adults, and it's it really comes from such a deep place in my heart, and it started at a very, very early age. I was about probably 5 or 6 years old, and I started having night terrors at night where I would go to sleep fine, and then I would wake up in this kind of crazed panic, and oftentimes I would get so upset that I would vomit, which is like, that's always like a little bit TMI, but like that's how, like, it was such like a visceral, like actual body experience for me. And when you're that little, that's frightening, and you don't know why it's happening, and you're almost not in your own body. And I had really amazing parents, thankfully, and my dad would just sit with me forever until the moment kind of passed. Sometimes it would take a couple of hours, and just kind of hold me and tell me it's okay. And I'd start worrying, like, oh, I'm not sleeping, I'm whatever. And he's like, I remember him always saying, like, nobody ever died from not sleeping for a night. Like, it's like, and he would always tell me that. But it became more and more frequent as I got older, and this was pre-internet, pre anything, where you were able to Google something and say, like, what's wrong with my kid?
Right.
And so there were very few resources, and we lived in a small town. And I think it's certainly, this back in the 80s, like, I think there was like a mental health stigma, and of like not really going to talk about it with other parents, and
Right.
you just kind of think your kid's like different and you're going to sort of deal with it behind closed doors. And but my parents were incredible, and they eventually found a clinical psychologist, Dr. Tina Fleischman, and over the course of several months, going on a weekly basis, she taught me how to control my breath and then relax my body. I remember I would visualize like liquid metal like pouring through my body, so it would get really, really, really heavy. And then just taking those big, full, deep breaths. And then I would she helped me sort of construct this really vivid visualization that would take me, several minutes to build up in my head. But it would get that sort of parasympathetic nervous system triggered and relaxed. And I could kind of get into the moment and realize that I was okay and I was safe. And like I said, it took several months to really learn it and be able to do it on my own and start to build that awareness of, because by now this had just turned into generalized anxiety. So I would just be fearful of just going into my bedroom at night, like as soon as the sun would set, like that.
Yeah.
Start to become aware of that lump in your throat, right? Or for me, that's what it was. And it was like, oh, okay, now is my time to do, what essentially was a meditation. And I forget what I called it. I think it was like a visualization, maybe I said, or something. But and it helped an incredible amount. I went to summer camp that same year by myself. Like it was, I started to, I think at that point too, I had built so much reliance on my parents. My parents had to go everywhere with me, or I just felt fearful. And then you start to build that secondary anxiety of what happens to my parents. I'm not okay in the world without them. And like as a kid, you sort of feel like that anyway, but this was extra like, oh, there is no other human being that can make me feel better other than them. So it was just compounding, right? And so like being able to go out into the world, and I think at this point I was probably like eight, nine, being able to kind of go out in the world and be okay a little bit by myself was such a massive gift. And continue to use it. I was in a really bad horseback riding accident when I was 17. I broke my back and neck and had a pretty severe brain injury. And
oh my God.
And I, turning back to it, during that time as well, and leaning heavily into that was very helpful. And then just kind of traveled through life a little bit, and then in 2015 I had my own daughter. And you're able to kind of really analyze like, oh, like this is not just about me anymore, and I've got this thing to take care of. And I always talk about how it's like so crazy to me that they just let you take it home from the hospital and like don't like ask you anything like, are you okay with this? Like, are you going to be fine? Do you need help? Like, they're like, bye, like, hope you feed it. And it's like, but I really started to worry, what if she has this thing really early on in life? What am I going to do for her? And I just started I got really curious, oddly, very, very curious about all of it. And, I think it was, I was Googling like, what are solutions and what are, all of that. And certainly like, oh my goodness, there are so many now, and there's tons for kids, but I felt like so many of them were based on a phone or some sort of smart device. And I just knew for myself, when I pick up my phone, I don't feel it. I rarely am I ever just like, oh, I am so relaxed. I am in control of the moment and I am in the present, right? Like, it's like,
right.
Oh my gosh, it just like sucks your brain right out of your head and you're distracted. And how many times I pick up my phone just to check the time and I'm like, all of a sudden I'm in my email, like, what happened? 10 minutes have passed.
How'd that happen?
Yeah. And I think like at that point too, I had started to use some of the meditation apps, and I love the content on them, and they are really accessible and they are right there. But honestly, like I can't even count how many times, like I said, opened the phone to do a meditation, got sucked into something, or just got sucked into like, oh my gosh, there's 1,000 choices. Oh, what's going to be the perfect choice? Let me like, oh, look at this one, look at this one. And then all of a sudden the 10 minutes that I had allotted for that meditation was gone. Right. And then I'm on to my email or whatever it is. And so I thought like, oh gosh, for kids, certainly I would want something better than this. And when I didn't find it, I I thought maybe I could be the person to do it, and selfishly just for my own kids. And so I started to kind of build that. And then in 2018, I had the meditations recorded. I hadn't quite figured out how to do the electronics of it yet, but I was sort of building up to it, moving pretty slow. At this point, I had my second son. He was 18 months old, I guess, when this happened. So in 2018, May of 2018, I got a phone call that my dad, who was perfectly healthy, had been really suddenly hospitalized. And so I flew home, and so vividly remember walking into that ICU room and just feeling so helpless, seeing the person that had always been there for me in my worst of times, and I couldn't do anything in that moment. And my stepmom said, he really likes the meditations that you've been recording for your company. Like, why don't you just start playing some and just see if it helps him. And so I did. And I just sat there and we listened, and I held his hand and we just breathed. And, the nurses in the room were taking this collective breath. My stepmom was, and it was this really amazing moment where his heart rate came down and we were just able just to be there all together. And after that's, kind of the moment that we had, was like, oh my gosh, no, this is not just for kids. Like, this could be for all humans. And like, certainly my experience is not unique. 1,000 people probably every morning walk into more than that, like certainly like you walk into an ICU room and see their favorite person, laying there. And I was like, gosh, if I could give this gift to them, and it would, that I kind of want my life to be structured around that now. And so the next day we ended up losing my dad. And I think that was like such a pivotal moment that I don't know that I would have gotten to where I've gotten so quickly if that had not happened. Because I think I was just really, you're always like very surprised when these moments happen, that your own heart doesn't stop. It's like, oh God, wow, the world just keeps spinning. How incredible. And you're sort of a little bit lost for a second. But I knew that, he had an incredible life of helping hundreds of people in his lifetime, that I wanted to turn those hundreds into millions if I could. And I knew that was now my mission to do that. And so I think so that was May, and then 6 months later I had all of the files and drawings done for the device. And then 4 months later, I was on a plane to China to find factories. It was really important to me that this was going to be as high quality, as physically possible, but as affordable also as possible. And so I took a trip over there and toured several factories to make sure that this was a product that I could leave in my own kid's bed and feel really, really good about it. So I spent some time over there, found incredible manufacturing. And then by December of that same year, I had 5,000 Zenimals showed up at my door.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, now is the work, right? And now here we are. And then I launched the company in March of 2020, which the world shut down. It's like a very interesting time to start a business. And it was incredible, and it was neat to be there for kids who were suffering. Like that was such an unbelievable time. And I think, like one point that I missed too was like what really propelled me into doing this was doing some research and wondering, like, is this an actual needed thing? Because I think in 2015, like we were talking about mental health and like, oh yeah, like depression, blah blah blah. But then you actually look at like the real statistics of what is actually, like, how many people are actually suffering. And the CDC in 2015 reported the second leading cause of death for kids aged 10 to 14 was suicide. And this is pre-pandemic. Like that to me was like, this should be the news every day. Why did I not? I mean, I was embarrassed that I didn't know that. I
didn't know that.
And we are sort of sheltered from that sort of ugliness of what we're experiencing now as a civilization with mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
again, we are sheltered from it because it doesn't feel good, right? And it
Right.
is fearful, and it, as long as it's not your kid, right, you're just going to kind of maybe put your head in the sand because it's pretty painful.
Right.
And but as soon as it is your kid, it's, I wish I had known, I really wish I had
Right.
known. And so that
Mm.
was, you know, a big mission of mine, was to shed light on that. And then the pandemic happened, and we had no choice, right? It's because it was more kids than not that were suffering. And so I was so grateful to be a part of that. And um, yeah, does that kind of, I guess, a very long-winded, does that, I guess that was essentially sort of my journey leading up to this
Yeah,
point.
that totally fills in, and I love hearing, because everyone has a story
Yeah.
to where they are and what they're doing. And I mean, I sort of had an image when you were talking about your dad and recognizing how he touched people, and your and how that touched you, and then that continuation of that, you know, spreading of goodness sort of looks. And that's so beautiful, the way
Yeah.
that people impact us, and the fact that it really does sort of ripple out like that.
It does. It so does, I think. And it's so good to be reminded of that, because it's,
Hmm.
you don't, I was talking to somebody about this, about just like the power of teachers, and sort of what they have in this world, and the ability to either be the best part of your childhood or the worst. Right.
Mm.
And sometimes the worst also shape us, right. And propel us into some, some direction, like, but I think I remember my favorite teacher, Miss Melizer, we called her Millie,
Mhm.
and I had her for 2 years. Like, and like she was huge in my world. And then Miss D'Alessandro, I still talk to her, and she is actually one of my advisors for the company. And
Yeah.
it's like those people that believed in you and shaped you. And I think um like I think Ms. D, Carol knows, but
Mhm.
but they like Millie probably doesn't, right? Like, and so I think, it's you just being aware of your impact,
Mhm.
with your experience here, and the ability, right? Like, you are limitless what you can do, and the choices that you can make to bring goodness and kindness into the world. And sometimes it's just smiling at somebody, right? And then they go and smile at somebody else. And it's I think a huge thing for me is like internet, you know um awareness, I guess, and
Mhm.
social media, and
Mhm.
leaving comments, like, if what if we just decided to stop with the negative comments, and stop with the judgments, and stop and
Right.
just, and comments became more of like, it's like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't think, say anything at all.
Right.
I don't know, but like, because like, you can be so impacted by one
Yeah.
individual that says something just so cold to you that maybe they don't think is going to really, like, they think that you're above that or whatever. But like, very few humans are above like being
Being hurt.
like annihilated right, by a stranger for no reason
Right.
or whatever it is.
Right.
And so I think, like, just, you and I, before this call, talked about like curating sort of your experience
Mhm.
online, and like try, what's so great about the internet is like, it does not just show up at your front door, right? You have to seek it out,
Yeah.
you have to turn it on, you have to go find it. And so it's being aware and saying like, hey, why am I going to find this? Like, what in my body is telling me that I want to see and
Mhm.
experience this, right? And so it
Mhm.
is curating that, and like, getting that toxicity out
Yeah.
of what you are experiencing. You can do it. Like, you
Yes.
could like
Yes.
pull out of it. Don't dive into it. And I think there, Eckhart Tolle talks about, the pain body and things like that, and that it does sort of want to be fed. And it's like, no, 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 no. Let me help you in a different way.
Right.
Let me be aware here. And I see that you want to do this, and I see that you want to, give yourself affirmation that you're not good enough, but I'm going to stop you from that,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I think like that to me is something like I'm learning,
Mhm.
and it's been so beneficial, and making sure too that I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but that
You're good.
analyzing like who's in your life, and
100%.
that is, for me, it's always like, are you in my boat rowing, or are you drilling some little holes? Like that,
Ooh,
it's like, I only want people that are rowing. And that's a tough one sometimes, right? Because sometimes it's
yeah.
hard to let go of people. But if you really can become aware of what their impact is on
Mhm.
your life, again, it's your experience. You curate it yourself. Like, what
Totally.
do you want to feel? And yeah, I know it's hard, right? Like, and we love these people or whatever that are maybe kind of damaging us, but then we're going out into the world
And
damaged
damaging others.
and
Yeah.
damaging others, and being short. And it's like, I see it with my, self every now and then. If I'm having to interact with people, maybe I don't make me feel so good. Like, I bring that home, right? And I'm a
Totally.
little edgier with my kids or whatever. I'm a little less patient when they're
Right.
whining. It's like,
Right.
oh, and then they're going to go to school with that attitude, and maybe,
Mhm.
say something to a child. Like, it's crazy. Like you said, like, finally circling back, like, it is this huge ripple effect. And I think
Yes.
being aware of your impact, and maybe you feel small in the world, right? But
Mhm.
you are
Right.
not. If you're interacting with other human beings on any level, physically, online, like whatever it is, um you need to you it's good to step back and say, like, what am I drilling holes?
Oh, in my
um
own boat. Right.
yeah, and you're in my own boat or in someone else's boat, heaven
Right.
forbid, without even knowing. um
Totally.
and so I think that's something. Oh boy, I really like went off on a tangent there, but
There are no tangents there. 100%. I, Anna mentioned before we started recording, she's reading a book right now called Indistractable.
yeah, yeah,
I will have that linked in the show notes.
yeah,
I have added it to my queue already.
yeah.
Um, but I totally agree. I mean, I don't use social media. I stopped using social media when I was a senior in high school. So that was
Wow,
like more years than I think
that's
have
amazing.
gone by.
That's amazing.
I graduated college in 2020, if that puts any
Okay.
perspective on how long that's been. But
Not too long.
not too long. But it's funny, like I talk about my friends and we think that 2016 when we graduated high school was like
Yeah,
3, 4 years ago,
it's
but
crazy.
it's been
Yeah,
six,
it's
however.
crazy.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is
I
crazy.
think the pandemic put us sort of in like a time warp of what
Literally,
is time? Like,
literally,
where did it
literally.
go?
Totally,
Yeah,
for real?
that's incredible. I think, like, and again, like, I never want to shame people for being on
Totally.
social. I'm not a big, I also don't, I prefer not to be on social media. I think for, like, you now having like a company and things like that, you a little bit like, there is like, you want community outreach, and you want to be able people to
Right.
access you and things like that. And that is a great platform. And honestly, like, I have connected, with other founders and things like that through social
Totally.
media. But it's it the awareness that I have to
Yes.
have, when I
Yep.
go in to that Facebook group or whatever. It's like,
Right.
don't you dare look at a thing. You are here to go ask a question about manufacturing, and then you are
Right.
going to click out of this, and you're going to go
Hmm.
read or be with your kids or do whatever it is, because it is formed to be addictive. And so I think for you, like, being so young and being willing to do that for
Right.
your own mental health,
Right.
huge. It was huge.
Yeah, exactly. And I share that because, you know, I feel like that was the first step in my acknowledging that I, like you said, is a choice. I think that part of it is the relationship around the internet is so ingrained in our lives that we don't even acknowledge it as a choice. It's like, I must be on social media to be an existing human being. you know, to be
Yeah.
like socially normal or whatever. And I think that that acknowledgement first of choice, and then, like you said, the drilling of holes is such a beautiful analogy. And what I like to share in with reself clients and members is like the common idea about, if I'm bringing my phone into bed, who am I inviting into bed with me at night? And like,
Yeah.
should they be in
So
my this
true.
like sacred space of my
Yeah.
bedroom and like
Yep.
my mind before I'm about to go to bed? You know,
Mhm.
I think that there's so, kind of like you're saying, setting up these barriers and boundaries around these things that are designed to be addictive and keep us on them as much as possible. Like, one of the choices I love to share that made such a huge difference is I removed all of my notifications from my lock screen. So I
Yeah.
don't get any, there's like, if I check the time, it's
Yeah.
those sort of things. Like you said, I acknowledge that if I look at the time, I see these things, I'm sucked in. So I remove the things that suck me in, and then it just stays there. And,
Yeah.
you know, being in control of our screen
Yeah.
experience is so much like, in a sense, yeah, it's easy to remove oneself from social media because then I don't have to deal with any of it.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more, there's a lot more choice in designing that experience for oneself in what serves. And like you said, choosing who we, I don't even think it's about following and letting follow. It's like acknowledging that's allowing people into our lives and not, whether
Mhm.
we know them personally or not. It's who do we want to surround ourselves with,
Yeah.
and what is that experience, and the mindfulness and intention behind that is certainly so um important and empowering to make those choices. And also, like you said, um you know, when we're drilling holes in our own boats, and knowingly or unknowingly in others, um that's the ripple as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
And that is, you know, that's something to be mindful of, and aware that, you know, my own unhappiness with myself is going to impact the way that I speak to and treat others.
Yes.
And, you know, like the example you gave of the negative comment from a stranger,
Yeah.
it's, you know, there's so many levels to it. And like the pain body, I think there's also a pain body of our collective
Oh, yes.
humanity,
Correct. There
right?
is. Yes.
Does
Absolutely.
he say
He
that?
does. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah.
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 So, you know, when we take care of our own pain, we
Yeah.
take care of that
Yeah.
collective pain
Yes.
for
And then you
sure.
stop it, right? Like you're not like you're
Exactly.
going to stop that cycle and you're going to stop passing it on to children and things
Right.
like that and just being aware and like listen, I think there is also, you know, acknowledgement of like we have evolved as human beings sort of. Right? Like if you look at you know sort of like go back to like when we were living in caves you know
Right.
with our tribe or group or whatever it was
Right.
a pretty small group you know for the most part and so we were hardwired to quote unquote keep up with the Joneses. You didn't want to be the weakest link because then maybe you were going to be kicked out of the cave, maybe you were going to be left behind. And so it's like we're going to you know we want to maintain status quo like you know and be like you know make sure we're like oh like-minded and things like that and we're
Mhm.
following you know following the rules and making sure we're you know doing the cool thing or whatever but now like that wiring
Yes.
is brought into the cave with a million people. And so how are
Mhm.
you supposed to look around and say like I need to be like you, I need to be like you, I need to be like you, I need to be like you or I'm not safe. right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, if you're doing that with 1 million people, like, are you going to go to all of the vacations that the 1 million people did? Are you going to wear the t-shirt that all the 1 million people did? Like, no. Like, and then that evokes this, like, I'm not safe, right? And I'm afraid now of being kicked out, right? And not being seen. And I think that's the fear of not being on social media and things like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
get it, right? Like, that we're hardwired for this. It's, it's
Right.
like the same reason that, like, teenage girls are terrible to their parents. They're hardwired to do that because they're supposed to leave the nest and go have babies. So we're designed to, like,
Mm.
push our parents away. And, like, I think, but being aware sort of that hard wiring, it takes that edge off of, like,
Yes.
oh no, I'm just supposed to feel this. It's not actually real. I'm actually safe.
Right.
I'm actually okay.
Right.
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 And so I think just teaching people, like you don't need to go, you don't need to eat at that restaurant or whatever, take pictures of your food to show other people that, like, you are also eating the food,
Right.
or whatever it is, to be safe.
Totally.
I think, I don't know, I think that has been beneficial to me, of just like, oh, I'm not pathetic or whatever, like, I'm just wired to
Mhm.
be like this, and I'm going to choose not to feel this. I'm gonna change this for myself. And
Exactly.
I do it, like, if I've had a rough day or whatever, or, like, I check my email twice as much because
Mm.
I'm nervous, right? Like, I was
Mhm.
like, I want to, it's almost like a numbing thing that I'm looking to do. And so I'll catch myself every now and then and be like, oh, what else can we do here that would be healthier? Can we go for a walk? Man, maybe we can go for a walk without our phone. And then lo and behold, like, I'm actually okay. I'm safe.
100%.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sort of
Yes. Yeah.
perpetuating that fear.
Yeah. And
Uh,
what you just described is the awareness. Like the fundamental piece is having that awareness of what's driving this.
yeah.
What is the need here that, for the most part, which can circle us back to Zenimals,
Yeah.
is the screen free. Like, what
Yeah.
can I do here that's not dependent on this
Yeah.
device that, in so many ways, is intrusive
Yeah.
in our lives
Yeah.
and doesn't have to be? I mean, just like, the shovel is a tool that humanity invented,
Yeah.
so is technology and our cell phones and a lot of these uh, apps that are on our phones are all marketed as tools.
Yeah.
And the difficulty is when we become a slave to them, when we are sort of taken over, forget our choice, and they have this bigger role in our lives than, like you said, the walk in nature without the phone that
Yeah.
can yield. It's not even productivity. It's maybe I have an insight about
Yeah.
what I'm experiencing through that connecting within me and without, like throughout me and the world that I am genuinely deeply interconnected to and a part of.
Yeah. And it is like, like, I think, to give people credit, like, these produce chemicals in your body, like
Yeah.
that, like, you get hits of dopamine, which is crazy to me. Cortisol is increased, adrenaline is increased, like, that is, like, physically having an impact that gives you very little choice, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's going to override a whole lot of
Right.
systems.
It's an
And
addiction
it is
system.
a complete addiction, and it makes everything upstairs very, very noisy. And that is something, circling back to meditation, that a daily practice can just quiet that noise, and that, like, getting that reprieve um can, like, increase serotonin, which is like that's good chemicals, right?
Mm.
Um and sort of, quieting that monkey mind, that inner chatter, and building that awareness, that ability to sort of turn turn the camera, inward and be like, oh, what is actually happening? And instead of just like, I'm out of control, this is, like crazy and I'm not good enough. And I'm like, I'm just going to be nasty to myself that I messed up today or whatever. And I'm just, if I beat myself up, I'm going to be a better person. It's like, no, like if you like, I always talk about this, like there is no other human being that you will talk to more on the planet in your lifetime than yourself. And like just being reminded of that, of like, so if the person who is talking to you the very most is negative on you and is hard on you, like that's going to impact anybody, right? And so I think like for me, like I've worked really hard the last, probably I don't know, however long, maybe a decade. It's been a bit, of being nice, and catching myself of if I mess up or if I make a mistake, I'm not going to say like, you're an idiot, right? Like,
Right.
How could you do that? Instead, like, would I talk to my child like that? No,
Yes.
no, right? Like treat yourself like you would treat a little kid and say like, oh my gosh, yeah, look, oh, that was not the right choice, but we're okay and we're safe and I've got you. And I hear that you're afraid, right? And that you're worried and you're trying to protect me by saying these things, but I got it. Especially as adults and kids, we can teach this too. Like, I think, I read something the other day that was like, be careful of what you say to children because you're building their inner voice. It was something to that effect. And you're like, oh man, that's a lot of pressure.
But it's like when you take care of your own house,
yes,
what you present is in that same way.
Yeah. If you can be nice to yourself, you can be nice to anyone, but genuinely nice, right? Like not like narcissistic nice.
Totally. Totally. Because I mean, in that sense, half the other point of that is the deep self, negativity and insecurity. And I think it's so fascinating. And I think it really is mirrored in your journey, the link between parent-child dynamics, and in that bigger picture, the unfortunate statistic you shared about childhood suicide being the second largest killer. And I think that's, for me, that's why I created Reself. That's why I continue with Reself. It's because these changes, which we can make now in ourselves and in our small families and communities and schools, that's what changes society genuinely. And it's not like woo woo, it's just straight up what happens, like you said, with the example of speaking nicely to yourself and being able to speak nicely to a child. And it's that practice too that I share with clients, is like the inner parenting and like learning to talk to ourselves in the exact way that you just shared that we would talk to a child, and also being able to step into that self-leader role like you also exemplified, which is, I know you're afraid, but we've got this. I've got you. And there's a part of me that isn't afraid and that can rise to this occasion. And
I think like, I think like there is, because like you said, like there was a point that you were fractured, right? Like it's not everyone has like a really deliberate thing, but like most of us can look back and be like, oh, I was 4, right? Like when I got fractured. And that like that makes that, like, maybe it's a hairline fracture, maybe it's small, but it's there. And so I think like you turning as a grown up, or whatever, or as, somebody older and being like, oh, you're still there, you 4-year-old. Like, I got you. Oh my goodness. Like somebody wasn't there for you, but like, hey, I can do this. We can do this for each other. I'm just going to hold your hand. And then like, oh, that like you as an adult, like, oh, I'm helping someone, me, right? Like, it's like, oh, that's so, that's it. I love that you're teaching that. I think, gosh, like if we can just give that gift to everybody, like I don't know if it solves the world's problems, but it sure makes things a whole lot less painful.
100%. I think, I mean, I think it does solve the world's problems
Probably.
because as individuals, we're the foundation of society.
Yes.
So when we take care of ourselves, we genuinely are taking care of our ability to authentically show up and contribute to the world as we, I believe, are meant to in each of our own sort of journeys. And, um, it's not, I think that's probably one of the hardest things is to that relationship with self.
Yeah.
That's why reself is called reself,
Love that.
because one, if we can climb that hill, then I don't think there are hills that we can't climb and rise to the occasions.
Yeah. It is really remarkable. And I think, yes, I feel like I'm helping people, but then I sort of look at people who dedicate their whole entire existence to like helping like whatever these really specific like but very intense causes like in other
Right.
countries or whatever, and they like their whole life is just dedicated to this one thing. I was watching the documentary on the rescue of the soccer team in Thailand in 2018 or something, and it was like oh, like watching the amount of people that went there and were like scooping mud out and diverting water and all of that. And it's like I I didn't fly there, right? I was a fully fledged human being adult in 2018. Like I didn't fly there to do that. And I think it's so remarkable how many humans that we have on this planet that are capable and willing to do that. And it's like if we can, like that, it makes me just like love humanity, because like you can get sort of sucked into like everyone's horrible and like everyone's like selfish and like doing all these destructive things and all of that. But it's like if we can keep looking to those people and building more of those people, like you're right. I mean, it does start to solve a whole lot of problems. And I think, I don't know, that those people inspire me so much to do more in the world instead of sort of existing in my own little microcosm and all of that. But I think like, and meditation does that, like building that awareness outside of your own ego and realizing that it is just an ego. Yeah. I don't know. There's so many good things. I I could talk about this stuff all day long.
Hey, that's why this podcast exists.
Yeah, I like it so much. I like it.
Yeah. I went through a sort of similar experience and journey with that, and sort of feeling like, coming to the ability to conclude that, okay, so I used to in that experience, like look to other people, as you exemplified, that are like really in the trenches, so to speak. And I would compare myself to them and be like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not involved enough. Yeah. And so I came to this sort of ability to distance myself from the shoulds and the have to, and the ability to allow that to inspire me, but also, as I've shared before in our conversations, like cultivate my own Lydia-ness of that expression. Right. So it's like, while not all of us are out there saving soccer teams, there are those people, and they can inspire us, and we can be moved by them and reminded of the beauty and interconnectedness of humanity and the goodness, and that can inspire us to do our own versions of that. And I think that that's also really important to be reminded of, I think especially again with social media, where we
Yeah.
see so much of it,
Yeah.
whether, it's performative or genuine and like
Hmm.
needing to chime in and show up on things and issues versus what does my genuine being feel called to,
Yep.
feel inspired by, and where can I put my energy, circling back to what you said in the beginning,
Yeah.
that just makes that impact
Yeah.
that I feel I'm here to have
Yeah.
and make.
Yeah. And maybe you're inspiring the person that then is going to go
Totally.
solve and malaria, whatever it is, right? Like,
Exactly.
and maybe that's because every huge thing needs a ton of little things to happen in order for that to
Mhm.
happen. And so I think yeah, not getting wrapped up in the, well, I can't go, you know save, child labor slaves or whatever, like, but what could my role be
Right.
in that? And because there are, maybe you don't get to be the hero, but like maybe you can help the hero, or like whatever, I don't know, whatever it is, but not just giving up because you're not the person that's going to fly to Thailand, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's huge
Right.
with it.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's as much as it's that sort of relationship with self as we were talking about, um, as much as that is for me philosophically the solution, that root solution, it's also, again, in that same way, the root solution to not continuing half of the problems that are plaguing us as a collective. Like the example of child labor. Okay, so I start a company instead of, you exemplified this, instead of
Mhm.
mindlessly just choosing a manufacturer, you, in the reasonable framework that you had, went and found something personally that aligned with you and your
Yeah.
values,
Yeah.
taking that time and
Mhm.
and those that valuing to act in alignment with that is, I think, so, like you said, it's those little things that add up to the bigger relief.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so. I really, really hope so. It's um it's also exciting. I think like there are so many, possibilities to like you said, to touch the world in a better, like in a better way. And um I love that inspires me a lot. I appreciate you
Mhm.
saying that because it's
Mhm.
a good reminder.
Totally.
Good reminder.
Totally.
Yes. Oh, stuff. This is great.
um yeah, it's really, it's really important, and I think that's, for me, that's the beauty of what business can do. I'm
Yeah.
constantly so inspired by Patagonia, for
Patagonia.
example.
I mean, can we like talk about Patagonia? Like I it and what's so incredible to me is like for me, like if I need a jacket, I'm only gonna buy a Patagonia jacket, right? So like
Mm,
it's not like they're just like losing in this game and they're just like falling on the sword. Like it is very, very possible to be profitable and all of that, but actually like do some good in the world and be responsible. And so it's like it's time now that we turn and say like, okay, Patagonia
yeah,
pulled it off, they're fine, they're
they're
able to
better
pay
than fine.
they're able to pay their salaries and things like that, and it's all like it's all working, but it's contributing in a really spectacular way. So you're going to
Yeah.
turn and you're going to look and you're going to say, okay, Facebook, okay, Google, or whoever, like whatever other big
Right.
people out there. It's like, what are you gonna do?
Hmm.
And then when are you going to take some responsibility? Because it's again like you're not falling on the sword. It's proven that it's possible
Totally.
through Patagonia. And gosh, if I mean, I just want to give that company a big old hug because it's really incredible. And I aspire, with my own company to be more like that. And I hope that they're inspired. I'm sure that they're inspiring others to do it. But like, what an incredible thing to be like one of the first to say, no, I think we can, I think we can prioritize this.
100%. And, there's so much there. Like, first, what you said about responsibility. I think that the beauty of whatever we do, be it business, as a employee, whatever, a mother, a father, a teacher, it's acknowledging. And I think part of it is awareness and slowing down and cultivating, like we said, that sort of meditative perspective and inward looking of, in each moment, what is my responsibility here? And as much as it can be, I think, daunting, perhaps as a consumer, like every time I'm going to buy something, I'm going to ask myself, what's my responsibility here? What is the impact of buying this product? It reminds us of, I think, one of the things that we've been so disconnected from, which is our impact and where everything comes from. And unfortunately, I think that business was built, I think so many of our businesses in America were built in a time in which that was absolutely not part of the equation, and kind of, like you said, seemed to antithesize profit and capital gains. But like you said, Patagonia exemplifies that not only is it possible to be a profitable business, but it's in everyone's best interest to do that. And here's that example. I wish that someone would write a business book about Patagonia. I haven't found any yet, but I would love someone to dissect and break down everything that they've done.
Did it. And how they did it. Write the recipe, right?
Literally.
More people will follow, because I think like it does take a pretty innovative mind and a certain person. Like I don't think we're all that person, but if that, like you said, like we were talking about earlier, like if he can, perpetuate and teach others how to do it, because that's his gift, right? Like whatever. And like, and I'm sure that I know that he talks and things like that, and that there is a lot of publicity around it, but I think you're right. Like, let's start reading those books.
Teach that in business school.
Teach that in high school, right? Like, whatever it is. I think like that's unbelievable. And that was the reason, like the first device that I released was for children, is it's like, well, let's start at the bottom, right? And so then like moving up, like at least then they're going to go out into the world with awareness or whatever it is. And so I look at my kids now, and I just seeing where education is, they're just, I mean, we're gonna go down a whole another rabbit hole here, but like
we can go down that rabbit hole. I'm so down.
Like, we're talking about like, before we jumped on recording this, it was like, like just like that the idea of the living a whole life and things like that, and I look now of how we are raising children. And I asked my daughter the other day, I was like, how much do you go outside? She's like, oh well, it's during snack time, we can either eat snack or we can go play on the playground for 15 minutes. And I was like, what? So she's either got to pick, am I going to eat my healthy snack, or am I going to go play and move my body? And it's like, oh my gosh, like what? Like that, those should be two individual things that like should be like probably longer than 15 minutes, right?
Right.
And how much they're sitting now and not moving their bodies, and the food that we're serving in the cafeteria. And like I like, it's so, I mean, like our the school system that we're in, they offer free breakfast and free lunch, which I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, good. Like we're starting, like
Yes.
this is like a start. But I'm like, but what are you feeding? It's like,
Right.
oh, Cheetos. Oh, hang on. Because like
Not
we
nutrition.
have some things to do here.
Yes.
But I think like, starting with children is such a great place, because then at least in the future we're fixing some things, and then
Mm.
and we can start to fix some adults. I don't know, it is all very overwhelming, but like there's a lot to be done, and that's
Totally.
exciting too, right? Like
It
change is
is.
super exciting. And I think that there was something else that I want to say, um Near, who wrote Indistractable, talks about this, is like the happiest that we ever are is when we are in hopes of something happening.
Oh.
And I loved that, because it's so true. You want, like you see people who have like quote unquote made it, or like won the lottery or whatever, and they're miserable because you basically fall off like the happy hormones like drop off a cliff once you've achieved something. And that's, again, like that's our hard wiring, is it's a survival thing. We're
Mm.
like you find the fruit, you're like, you're so driven to find the fruit, and then you find the fruit,
Right.
and your hormones are going to fall off, because it's like tomorrow we're also going to need fruit, so like I'm going to
Mm.
keep you working hard to do that.
Yeah.
And that's a hard wiring thing. But I think that is also such a wonderful thing to acknowledge, of like the journey, right? And like just in like the hope of things is, and acknowledging that joy that brings, and that
Mm.
um that drive, and like living in that moment, versus like I am not going to be happy until I get this thing. But like the thing that's driving you actually can make you also very, very, very happy, and that's like the biggest chunk of your life anyway, so why not embrace that moment? And also knowing that when you achieve it, you're going to lose that kind of part, that joy part a little bit. And
Right.
so being careful and of that. But I think, like, oh my gosh, if we can just like, instead of saying like, oh, because I will for sure find myself, the world is this horrible place, and like educate, like here I am like whining about education and la la la. It's like, oh, what if I could just like step into the joy of the hope of
Ooh.
fixing that,
Yes.
and sort of living in that place,
Mm.
and still like taking action through it, but
Yeah.
not coming at it and being driven by the negativity, right? Just like
Mm.
being more, kind of driven by that, the joy aspect that I get to be a part of.
I really like
So,
that, Anna. Thank you.
yeah.
I my background is in philosophy. That's what I majored in, and that is what I
Oh, very
spend
cool.
all of my free time
Yeah.
doing and reading. And so often I feel like for me, it's very easy to like education is something I think a lot about. And again, I mean, I think part of the thing is, and this is, I think, what relieves a little bit of the negativity for me with the education example. It's kind of like, first of all, right, clapping, beautiful that we have accessible education
Yes.
for all in our country. Then
Yeah.
we get to the point of, okay, but how does that skew based on socioeconomic status? And
Yeah.
then we get to, like you said, why aren't we outside? Why aren't kids being fed nutritious foods? I had the privilege of going to um, a private school, and that was like my parents valued education over everything. And but even there, the food wasn't nutritious. And sure, this was like, early 2000s, mid to 2010s, but I would talk to the administration about this, and it was kind of like, well, this is what it is, there's nothing we can do, this is good enough.
Yeah.
But it really, I mean, when we break everything down, it's like we have to go outside to
Yeah.
be happy. We
Yeah.
have to move our bodies to be happy to have those higher functioning brain powers of learning and critical thinking and everything like that. We need to move. We need to not be sitting all the time. We need nutritious food to fuel our brain. Like, it's not much of a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
That these
But
things,
like, and even if you're only driven by like the financial aspect of it, it's like, okay, so if we have children that are moving their bodies and eating healthier food, that's less of a drain on the system as far as like work, as they get older, they're not going to have like, chronic health issues and things like that. Work productivity goes up. The drain on the healthcare system goes down because we've got healthier people. Like, if you were only driven by those facts, like, you can't ignore the science that people who eat junky food and are overweight or whatever, don't move their body, like, there's scientific proof that like that is expensive, right? Like that is expensive. And so I think however you need to approach this, like whatever
what does it for
put
you
in your bonnet, right? Like you can come at it from any which way to say like, this does not make sense, right? Like for me, I just care about like the human aspect of it. But like, if people are like, oh, we can only afford to feed kids Cheetos, it's like, there's a healthier alternative. Maybe it's a few cents more or whatever it is per child, but like a few cents versus thousands of dollars down the road, tens of thousands of dollars in healthcare or work productivity lost because they're staying home or whatever it is. Like, let's start looking at that, right? Like,
totally. Creative solutions are there as well. Like one, what about rooftop gardens? What about, teaching kids gardening and using that? Like, how rewarding for kids to eat what they're contributing to growing, right? There's like so many things that we can do. And, I really love that reminder of the hope that is there, because I think, again, for me, that's what drives, I mean, like, deeply philosophically, spiritually, like, that's why, why I have hope, is because all of those solutions exist. And there's so many fascinating, for staying in education, like alternative forms of education, things that we can try. I was talking to someone the other day who's she's in Maine, and there's a school that she's looking at for her daughter that they spend all, like, as much as it is literally physically possible, they're outside 24/7. Like, that's how they're educated, and they have proper clothing for it. And I think she said it's based on like a Nordic education that is like, if they can do it there, we can do it here.
It's possible. Like, it's super possible. I just realized that my internet is like, my thing is unplugged, so I'm seeing like, I'm just gonna plug this in really super fast. So sorry.
You're good.
I try to unplug my Wi-Fi at night so that I'm like convinced that I sleep better. It could be voodoo, I'm not sure, but I do it. But I forgot to. Anyway, I think like, if we can keep, like, again, like, that's the Patagonia model. Somebody's doing it. Somebody worked it out. They can afford to do it. Like, it's like, this is possible, and baby steps, right? It's like, just willing to take those like steps, and not just, well, it's good enough, right?
Right.
And I think they're like, and I get it. You get into like that, for like hardwiring and facts and like, and how it is. But like, you look at the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy, like, everything is destined to go into chaos. Like, if you throw, you open the lid of a puzzle and you toss the puzzle pieces up into the air, it's going to land in chaos, right? That's law. You can't not do that. But like, somebody has to come in and put energy in. There has to be a physical energy put in to organize and to make things make sense, and to diminish that sort of sense of chaos. And so I think for a long time have sort of been like, oh, it's good enough, we're good, we're good. And it's like, no, the puzzle pieces keep getting tossed in the air. Like we have to keep putting them together. Somebody has to do it. And people are doing it, right?
Yeah.
But I think just not accepting, because you continue in this swirl, right? It doesn't just like, you don't just put a puzzle piece in and it's fine. It gets tossed back up again.
I mean, even that example twofold. First, like we can, and I think that's such a beautiful visual to play with. And I love the idea of sort of this idea that, you know, we are in a larger sort of spiritual context, like we're God, the universe, playing as we've forgotten who we really are and what we really are, you know, a part of. And there's a play in it, like Leela, the Hindu principle of like divine play.
Yeah.
And Maya, the contrast of sort of illusion and chaos. And the puzzle is such a beautiful example because it's just a reminder of, all right, when we start the puzzle, right, it's chaos, it's complete chaos. But there's fun, there's joy, there's like soothingness in putting the pieces together.
And the joy, that's the joy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's like I can look at this as my sort of, what is it? Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill for eternity, and I'll never do it. Or I can look at it like it's fun.
It's fun
solving these problems, creating of literally at the fundamental, like contributing to the evolution of humanity.
It is joy. Like the sadness I feel when I complete. I love puzzles, by the way. It's like also why I think, but like the sadness I feel when I complete a puzzle, which is so interesting, right? Because you're like, that's the goal, is to complete it. But I actually get really sad because I'm like, oh, there's no more pieces. It's like, oh, you know, like
to the library, next puzzle.
Right. And then the next puzzle, you have another puzzle, and like the joy begins again, you know, and I think like, and like not feeling overwhelmed by seeing all of the chaos. It's like, oh, I can find my joy here.
And you know, the other piece too is I've spoken to one of my friends about this deeply. Again, I feel like I don't necessarily have a pulse on what sort of the general consensus is represented from social media, but we talk about like the general hopelessness that I think a lot of people, you know, who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and especially I think kids too, I don't know quite so much, but that I think is really, first of all, it's just another indication, I think, of where we are, but it's a really important piece to reconcile, I think, individually. Like you said, if hope is what drives joy and action, what does hopelessness do to us? And again, I think it's a fundamental choice to be hopeful, even if we're pessimistic.
For sure. Like just selfishly, like
to survive,
just to like enjoy your experience here. It's so short,
right?
You know, and I think like just because it's not pretty and because you're not a Kardashian or whatever, you know, like that's like I think there's a misconception on like what actually makes you happy, and I think I don't know. I don't want to like shame people or whatever it is, like in that and what they aspire to, and think like, oh, it's fine. I just think like there's ways to find real joy,
totally,
than like buying the right lipstick and now I'm happy because my lips look enormous, whatever it is.
I mean, it's the fundamental thing of like learning to question what we are told to aspire to. And I think in America especially, I mean, evidently that's all I can speak to, but that's one of, I think, our greatest challenges is, what are we selling people as aspirations? And like you beautifully pointed out, so much of what we're sold to aspire to turns out to not be fulfilling.
Yeah.
And having those deeper questions, I think, again, like you said, with children especially, is what is fulfilling, what is purposeful, what is meaningful? Because at the end of the day, when we step back and we take ourselves out of, worker bees in the hive kind of model of, I think, raising kids and putting them into a workforce, which I think fundamentally there's nothing wrong with, like, evolutionarily speaking, that was also always part of being a human, was work and working to survive, but asking ourselves now, I think, when we're in places of, we can just speak evolutionarily, like evolutionarily privilege of, we know for the most part, again, in my experience, like where my food is coming from, where my shelter is. Now we have the freedom and luxury to ask those bigger questions of, and what is my contribution, and what is my purpose, and what is fulfilling? Because what is, what is life? What is the purpose of my life, and how do I want to live it, and what do I want to aspire to? And, speaking of visualizations, like, some point during COVID, I did a visualization for weeks about what I wanted my life to be. Like, when I visualized it, maybe when I put it on a mood board, like, what was it? And then it was through that, and like through sort of the powerful emotions of visualization, that I kind of came to realize, like, in a sense, I feel like I have this. And this isn't fulfilling still. There's still so much perspective as to, like, the interior of the home I think I want, and all of these things actually don't matter. They provide beauty, and beauty is important in our human experience, but they're, it's that, like we said, the hope, the joy is in the loving and the experiencing. But what I think, there's a great article, I'll link it in our links, and I'll share it with you, from the Atlantic, that someone sent me years ago. And one of the sort of points it references, I think, is that if you buy a nice car, like, maybe you've been aspiring to it, after, I think it's like 3 months.
3 months.
Over. It's over. And, I think there would be such a profound shift if we could learn that and talk about that. Even with kids, again, it's like, when we're formulating dreams and what we want to aspire to, there's a lot of hope in using where we are to live more purposeful, connected lives. Because I think that this mental health epidemic that we have, and again, that statistic you showed us, just shows something's not working. This isn't it. And we can go in the direction of, sort of, in a pessimistic way, like the technocratic sort of state in big tech, and, keeping on that treadmill, for the use of that metaphor, and aspiring, keeping up with the Joneses, all of that. Or I think we have a really big opportunity to integrate mindfulness and interconnection and meaning back into our lives, that I think, for the most part, we've lost.
And I think what's really cool is that, like, because this is new, right? The technology stuff, so super, I mean, it's new in my lifetime, right? Like, that's pretty new. And I think, I love that there are people like Nir who are, coming up with solutions on, like, okay, it's here. we're here, we can't put the lid back on Pandora's box.
Right.
How can we learn from this? How can we live with it? How can we have it benefit us, and make us better? Because certainly, like, gosh, there's so many cool, so amazing, like, things that are going to come out of this. I think, especially in things like healthcare and giving, a doctor in, whatever country, the ability to talk to somebody in, Ohio, a doctor in Ohio, to try to treat, a patient correctly or whatever, like that. Like, I mean, like, that's very specific, but like, I think there are so many wonderful things that are going to come out of this era, but making sure that we're not going to implode from it, because there's it's kind of sort of scary, some of the things, but it's exciting, right? Like, I think, because there are people that are like, oh, hey, actually, this is why you feel like crap when you pick up your phone, right? Like, that's an awareness, right? And like, and getting people more knowledgeable on that. And I think, companies like Apple are taking on a little bit of responsibility, and, with the screen time alerts and things like that, and sort of building that awareness in, like, yeah, they too want us to be a little bit of addicted to it, and like, they're, whatever. But I think there are some things that are coming about that are like, hey, this isn't super for you. We're going to help you out a little bit, and like, try to reverse a little bit of this. So I think it is an exciting time, and I am very hopeful that it, in my child's lifetime, that this will hopefully be, sort of ironed out a little bit better. And I think, like, this, the plight with, like, with children, and teaching them what makes them happy. Like, I see myself fall into this pit all of the time, where I'm like, if I buy them something and, like, see the joy on their face, and I'm like, oh, there's something that's, like, released in me that's like, oh, you're doing a good job, like, whatever, like, they're happy, like. And I was like, oops, I think that's not the right happy. That like 2 seconds later, the toy is, like, in, on the floor, totally forgotten about for all eternity. And it just wasn't real happiness, right? It wasn't, that wasn't actually a thing. And so, learning that what I can give my child is the love, is the time, is the attention, is the being present, not being on my phone, things like that, because that's going to ingrain in them, like, a true sense of peace and joy. And I think there is, I think it was, trying to complete blank now. I don't know, but the premise of it was, like, the difference between joy and happiness, right? And it's like, oh, joy is, like, that really grounded, solid, like, peaceful content. It's a sense of being content, versus happy is that, like, super high, like, you've achieved, like, you've reached for something, and, like, and you got it, you finally got it, and I'm, like, so super happy, like acknowledging those two differences, and realizing that, like, happy is a short-lived thing, versus joy can be a chronic, experience, in the kind of the best of ways. And so building that, with ourselves, with our kids, again, difficult, because we do crave that instant sort of high of
right.
we're happy. Oh, this feels so super good. But maybe it's not maybe that's not the right happy.
Totally.
I don't know. It's hard. I'm not perfect at it by any means. I take my kids to Disneyland. I'm like, oh yeah, you want that Princess Wand or whatever, like, and she's just, like, psyched for 45 minutes, and then it's like, can you hold this? I'm done. Whoops.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have set a boundary, right? And then boundaries, oh gosh, we could just, like, all day long, there's so many things. But yeah, we're all trying to do the best we can do, right? I think that's and just continuing, to do that, and to be aware, and to applaud the people that are calling it out, and and helping us, you know.
Yeah,
Like that.
100%. We're all just figuring it out as it goes.
Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure, for
yeah,
sure.
it's it's really fascinating. And I think that for me, that's, I'm so curious about um this sort of, like we said, opportunity
Yeah,
in our own lives, and opportunity in whatever, however we have an impact, because like you said, we all have an impact. So
yeah,
what we can do, and being mindful of it. I'm curious to hear what your sort of experience is as a founder, I think, with hope, sort of
mm,
in the trenches and drudges of everyday sort of founderness,
yeah.
and um yeah, like
Yeah, it's I
building that
mean,
bridge to where you want Zenimals to be.
you know, it's not like unicorns and roses every day. Certainly, like there's been some pretty severe downs and things like that, but overall I'm extremely hopeful. And I think I have the personality a little bit that I want things perfect yesterday. And I really push very hard to like speed, speed, speed. We need to fix all the kids today. And what I'm
Mhm.
learning is like, that's not your journey, babe. Right? Like you're gonna just like lay, you a little bit, you need to lay back into the river and just like, this is where it's going to take me. And like, this is where I'm
Mhm.
supposed to go. Instead of like clinging to the rock and like, no, this is how it's gonna be, or whatever it is. And so I am learning to do that, but I am extremely hopeful. And do I think my product is perfect? No, but what I learned very, very early on is, perfection is the enemy of progress. And I'm doing the I know that I am doing the very best that I can do, within a balance. And
Mhm.
I pretty early on when I launched the company, I had a mom, she just wrote a review, and it was I would probably say like one of the most impactful things that happened after I had started the company. And she was sitting in a hospital room during COVID with her daughter undergoing her second round of a bone marrow transplant to treat a very severe form of leukemia. And her daughter was 10 the first time she had gotten it. I believe she was 4. And um, and she wrote and said, I ordered her a Zenimal, and it has made such an impact on her experience, and it's helping her get through this. And it was like, that is like, that one thing is like all I needed, right? And I would talk to her, and I ended up becoming friends with her mom. And I'm actually, this weekend I'm going to meet them in person for the first time, which I'm so excited. I'm going to go stay with them for 2 days.
That's
um but
exciting.
like that, those are the things that drive me. And like,
Yeah.
yes, the company has to be profitable to continue. And I, unfortunately, money is a thing that is needed to make this type of difference in the world. And so
Right.
yeah, there are like, those are kind of the bummer parts of like what I do, is making sure that the company stays afloat. And is that enjoyable? No, but it gets me to be able to go to St. George, Utah, to meet this little girl who makes me want to be a better person every single day of my life. And I get that opportunity, and like I never ever will take that for granted. And I am very hopeful in that. And um, I think there are ugly parts of of my experience in this, and there are negative things, and but at the end of the day, like, I like, this is what I mean, I get to have the hope every day that one more kid is going to get a Zenimal, and that child, like me,
Mhm.
will get to move through the world a little bit easier and feel a tiny bit less alone. Like
Mhm.
I got, and I think, like, making that ripple effect, like Dr. Fleischman gave me was just a little bit, cleaner sense of peace. And so, yeah, I am very hopeful. And I think I would get, like, if for sure, I always think vulnerability is always like a number one priority for me, and honesty. And it has not been perfect, and it has been very hard, and I have cried a lot of days. But I still love it. I still would do it 1,001 times again.
Yeah.
And I hope that other people, hear my story, and maybe, like, their fearful voice of saying, I'm not good enough to do my thing, my part, my piece in the puzzle,
Mhm.
that you are, and I don't have a master's in business. I don't have 50,000 hours of being a meditation teacher. I wasn't the best at whatever, anything that you might think. I would maybe convince myself I needed to start this, to
Mhm.
do this, and to make this a mission. But it's still working, and I am enjoying it so much, and feel like I am making an impact on some level, and I hope, to continue to make that a bigger impact. And um, so I hope other people, are inspired to do it too. Not everyone is an entrepreneur, and not everyone is a start your own thing kind of person, but like, whatever your thing is, like, I hope that people can find the courage to do it,
Mhm.
and when they do get knocked down and kicked in the teeth, that, like, that you get up again. And I it's anyone who's listening, like, yeah, I like, if you need to reach out to me or whatever, to like, hey, is this okay? Like, does this actually work out? It does. Like, and you're
Mhm.
gonna feel like some days it's not, and you're gonna feel like you're sunk, and you're gonna whatever. And then you're just, Brene Brown says that the best, like, you're in the arena, you're face down in the dirt, and you're bloody, and it's, maybe there's people in the stands shouting at you that you're not good enough and that you should just stay down. If you can just, like, lift a finger, like, that's, you can start, and then eventually you're going to get up onto your knees, and then eventually you're going to be standing again, and you're going to be okay. And so
Mhm.
reminding people that, yeah, you're face down in the dirt, but you don't have to stay there. And there are people always around that are willing to remind you of that, and finding sort of to that inner strength, that inner voice, that you can help yourself get up. You don't need something else to happen. You don't need a different job. You don't need a different house. You don't need someone to rescue you. I think, like, I certainly was hardwired, a little bit by Disney and things like that, of being convinced that I need to be rescued by somebody. And
Mhm.
um, because a lot of times we can just kind of rescue ourselves. And with other people and love, and things like that. But I think, taking your own hand and saying, like, come on, we got this. We're okay. You're
Yeah.
breathing, and we are okay. Um, is it's possible. It's hard. It's possible, though. Yeah.
Mhm.
And if that
Mhm.
that answers your question, but
That answers more than my question. That's
no.
it's so, you
Yes.
know, it applies to so much more than just like you said, just having our own business or whatever it is. I think for me at the root of it, it's authenticity. If it's
Yeah.
leaving that marriage that's making you suffer, then that's what it is, right? If it's going out on your own for a bit out of your friend group because your friends are all drilling holes or they're not rowing
Yeah.
you to where you want to be, then that's what it is. If it's moving to a completely new city, that's what it is.
Yeah.
But it's, like you said, it's those um it's the courage
Mhm.
to do what one feels genuinely called to do from within. And I think
Yeah.
that's the contradiction to what we were talking about earlier with what we might be sort of programmed or sold to aspire to. It's acknowledging those calls within our hearts. I think it's Brene Brown who calls them, actually no, it might be, no, it's Glennon Doyle
Ah,
calls
another,
them
oh, my
pings.
favorite. Oh, my
Yes.
favorite. Ah,
Yeah. The pings in our hearts,
yeah.
I don't think they ever quiet.
No.
They haven't for me.
Yeah.
So, you know, but what you said is really, it's the courage and acknowledging that um life is hard.
Yes.
These things are hard,
Yeah.
but it's, the first principle of Buddhism, that's suffering, but
Yes.
there is a way out of it. And I think that the arena image is so potent because it's getting up in the face of chaos and suffering and the hardness of life that comes from within.
Yeah.
And we can make ourselves strong. We can make our children strong to be able to do that. The buzzword today is resilience.
Yeah. Like stay
Getting
in the arena.
exactly.
Don't go up in the stands and start yelling at people that are fighting right in the arena, right? Like you stay in that arena.
Yes.
And if you're not, and for me, like it's the same like concept of drilling holes in my boat. Like if you're not also in the arena fighting, you don't get to have a say in what I'm doing. Right? Like if you're just like hanging out in the stands drinking a beer, sorry, you don't get an opinion here.
Totally.
Right? But like if you're alongside of me fighting, like, yeah, like let me hear you out for a second,
Yeah.
Because probably that opinion is going to be way more valuable than somebody that's up in the stands.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. But resilience, I mean, like that's like the hope and dream, right? It's like such a beautiful thing.
Right. But it's what we all need. I think in some degree, it's what we cultivate. The degree to which it's cultivated in us, from those around us, I think probably differs. It does differ based on everyone's experience and narrative of their lives and everything. And I think that, again, that arena image is so potent because whether we have been victimized by systems or people or circumstances, at the end of the day, and I speak from my own experience, we have to choose whether we're going to get back up, whether we're going to try to be the victor. Maybe we're not even going to assume that role of the hero, but we're going to try, because what is our life experience otherwise to not try? And I think that, going into that idea of mythology and story as telling us, aspiring us of a greatness within all of that is, that's the beauty, and that's sort of the inner journey of our humanness. And while it all sounds kind of, deeply philosophical and not necessarily practically applicable, I think it's the most applicable thing ever.
Yeah. So much so.
Yeah.
So, and it's been proven over and over again by people.
Right.
That like you were born with no arms and legs and like you now surf. Like that's a choice, right? You can choose to do that. But I think, and knowing that nobody else is going to make that choice for you. I think that's, and not waiting for somebody to make that choice, and not feeling like somebody has taken that choice from you. Not letting someone, take that choice from you. And it is, I'm not saying it's easy at all. And I'm not gonna, say like, oh, you're weak for not making this choice. Like maybe this is too big of a choice right now. But like, can you make a smaller choice?
Yeah.
That is still going to, propel like some sort of forward motion in in seeking some level of peace, you know, in your life. And I'm like, you know, speaking as a white woman, like I have had tons more privilege than so many other people. And so it is easy for me to sit here and say, like, oh, just pick yourself up, like you're fine. You know, it's like, well, the world bends to me a lot easier than to a lot of other humans. But I still want to be in the conversation, and I still want to, you know, try to inspire people, and I still want to help people, you know, discover that within themselves, and to change that, you know, that some people are more privileged in the world than others. And I think that's happening. I hope it's happening. You know, I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes it's two steps forward, 10 steps back, but
Right.
that's sometimes okay too. And you still, like, there are, you know, moments where you will take some bigger steps and you will regain that territory. And
Mm.
I think there's like so many people out in the world doing that, you know, and that, you
Yes.
know, inspire me so
Yes.
much. And so yeah, I don't know, I you know I I think I'm probably not, you know, maybe worthy of being an authority in this, but like I again just want to be in learning and contributing
Right.
wherever I can with 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 how I am in the world, basically.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think yes. And I think that there's, you know, part of the conversation is also we all have ways in which we are privileged and unprivileged, and acknowledging the ways in which some of us have more privilege than others. But I think it comes down to, then again, that deeper sort of um journey, and some of us have more to fight
Yeah.
against than others. But also um there's everyone brings value to the table.
Yeah.
And um you know, I think there's also something to use it. Like, if if we're privileged,
Yeah.
then we should use that
Yeah. Correct.
to do whatever we can,
Yeah.
you know? And I
Hmm.
think I don't feel like that's part of the conversation as much. Or even for me, like you know, I was lucky enough to have a class in high school called Identity, where
Oh.
it was a seminar, an elective seminar, and it was looking at the ways in which all different forms of identification have
That's
privilege and
cool.
non-privilege, and, you know, systems that oppress and systems that benefit certain people and abilities and everything. And um you know, for so long I felt so much guilt
Yeah.
about where I was. And but what does that do
Yeah.
for
Right.
anyone to
No.
just stew and fester
Yeah.
in guilt
Nothing.
versus,
Yeah.
right, okay, this is where I am. And you know, I think, again, acknowledging, I mean, period, being a woman founder in business is
Yeah.
um a disadvantage, so to speak,
Sure. For
statistically
sure.
and everything, right?
100%. 100%.
So, okay, I can continue with that narrative
Right.
and continue to be the victim of that, or
Yeah.
I can figure out how to say yes, and
Yeah.
what am I doing
Yeah.
from this, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's just another it's just another way that it comes evidently it comes back to us and the
Yeah.
conversation that we're having in our head. Like, when you gave the example of um the arena thing, I sort of had the experience of, as you were saying that, like, in my head, it was like, and at the end of the day, even if those voices that are denigrating me are externally, they're all just internal.
Yeah.
It's all, what I am going to perpetuate to myself as that voice. What is that voice? Is it, the fans with their jerseys and their face painted cheering for me? Or is it all of the hecklers and the naysayers? And who are we listening to? And is the story of victim or victor?
Yeah. And you'll doubt yourself, right?
Exactly.
Like you will. And like that's, if you're doing anything that hasn't been done before, you're going to doubt yourself. It's like, well, why hasn't it been done before? It's like, yeah, there's not always a reason. So stop looking for one. It's like I do agree with that. And I certainly, like, being a female founder is not, it's like not the easiest path to travel, but like you can also just decide that it's not impossible. Right. And you can just, instead of like really harping on, well, this is harder for me and this is harder for me and whatever, it's like, this is just my journey with it. And you just keep moving forward. And so that's such a you said it so beautifully. And I love that. And it is a great reminder, and it does help with imposter syndrome. And I think, men have imposter syndrome too. And I think everybody's got it a little bit, but like, just like, and do it. I tell my kids this all the time. It's like, like they're like, oh, it's going to be too hard, or it's good. I don't, whatever, whatever thing. I'm trying to think of like an example. I can't think of one, but it's like, but just do it anyway. Right. Just do it anyway. Maybe it's not as perfect as you want it to be or whatever, but you did it. And it, like, maybe next time it will be better. Or maybe next time it will be different, or maybe, whatever, but like, just do it anyway. It is, because you are limitless, and you whatever lid on you put on yourself, like, got to take some responsibility for that, and say like, maybe that lid doesn't need to be there.
Right.
Maybe it can be a little higher, whatever it is.
Right. It's the surfer image that you gave.
Yeah.
It's the choice.
Yes, it's a choice.
Yeah.
Very much so. Oh, this is so great.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I had for you. This is what happens. It's like the flow, the rabbit hole, and
well, I would love to come on again. I think like this, what a delightful thing, and delightful conversation. So like, this is one of those moments where it's like, this is why I do what I do. Like, this is fun. I love this. This for me is joy. So thank you for being a part of that for me.
Thank you for coming on, for chatting, for sharing your wisdom and your experience and your inspiring story. And thank you for what you're doing. Zenimals is going to be my go-to holiday gift. Like, not even saying that, already planning it. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can't wait to have my own. I think I want the kids one because I like the turtle.
Oh, Lydia, this was so great.
Anna, this was so great. Thank you for coming on.